It's always a risk, Mr. Chairman, for an Irish Catholic to wear orange.
We really are pushing for a data hub inside SIGI that will allow us to be affirmatively preventing some of those bad dollars from going out. We have to implement laws that are not expressly defining each and every specific element of every potential violation.
Is it acceptable to have investigations open for 2, 3, or even 4 years?
No, sir. That is a massive problem for us.
So
and
in other words, what
kills
you're saying...
complaints. Let me finish my answer. Kills complaints and doesn't get to investigations.
Excuse me?
That the members that are waived on will control their own time, sir. Does the gentleman understand that?
Yes, sir.
Is it appropriate for an agency secretary to threaten to withhold information from an IG if they provide a report to Congress without the secretary's approval?
Oh, I don't think that's appropriate.
That is exactly what we're getting from the DHS IG, is that they can't release us a report because Secretary Mayorkas is refusing to give them access to future information.
Today we're joined by another orange tie that appeared today, the gentleman from Virginia. Jerry, you look good. I like that tie.
Thank you very much, but it's always a risk, Mr. Chairman, for an Irish Catholic to wear orange.
Well, then you're on your own. My wife would probably warn me that, too. Today, we're joined by Inspector General Mark Greenblatt, who currently serves as chair of the Council of the Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency, known as SIGI. Mr. Greenblatt also serves as the Inspector General of the Department of Interior. Mr. Greenblatt has been in federal oversight committee since 2003 as part of the legislative and executive branches. Before coming to DOI, Department of Interior Inspector General, he served as the executive director of SIGI, an organization that has been formed by Congress. He previously held leadership roles at the U.S. Department of Commerce, Office of Inspector General, U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations.
During the pandemic, there was a massive amount of fraudulent spending, widely referred to as the greatest theft of taxpayer money in history. So has the PACE data center been effective in recovering any of that?
Yes, sir. I think many of those investigations related to the pandemic are certainly ongoing right now and are already delivering returns. The key, though, is what you said at the outset, the initial part of your question there, which is the prevention piece. And that's where we really are pushing for a data hub inside SIGI that will allow us to be affirmatively preventing some of those bad dollars from going out the door.
That was actually my follow-up, was is this forward-looking? And one of the things I've spent a ton of time working with the GAO on improper payments and things like that, and I think we're far better off if we're in a preventive mode than we are in trying to recover what's gone out. But I just wonder if we've done all these audits on federal agencies. We've identified a number of problems. I get the GAO reports, and it tells me what % of the recommendations have been implemented, and sometimes it's none of them. Have you experienced the same issues with audits done by the Inspector Generals that never really get acted on, the recommendations never get implemented?
I think some agencies are better than others. I think some of the relationships between the IGs are better than others. And so I think it's a bit of a hodgepodge. Some of them are pretty good about implementing, but some of them are absolutely terrible about it. And so I think the key is two things. One is transparency, and so what we are doing at SIGI is trying to make our open recommendations even more prominent on oversight.gov, which is our primary outward-facing website, so that you all can see them. And then the other part of that, part two of that, is frankly pressure from Congress. If you all see open recommendations that we've identified as significant, come talk to us and we can share with you what are the hot button items that we think the agency should be implementing.
She had faced increasing performance problems in recent years, as you know. The number of completed audits dwindled. Dozens of senior auditors, investigators, and other staff quit or retired, many in frustration, in which they described to the Washington Post and other news sources as her mercurial leadership and lack of focus on the office's mission. So I raise that not to be critical of Siggy, but just the opposite, to say it's important for those kind of interventions. I began my remarks by saying that I thought that there could be more deliberate speed in some of this, and I guess some of that gets back to your ability to do what you have to do and whether or not you've got enough funding to do that. So I want to talk, if you would tell me a bit about your ideas of funding mechanisms that would increase your capacity and the ability of Siggy to take on issues like this and investigations like this and to conclude them much more rapidly.
Well, one of the problems that we run into with respect to the Integrity Committee is that it has no investigative staff. It has just a handful of lawyers and staff that help process complaints and sort of run the program, but they aren't investigators. The Integrity Committee has to go out and find OIGs who are not conflicted out to then go lead the investigations. And so I think having an appropriation specifically for specifically for investigators for the Integrity Committee, a cadre of investigators that would sit inside Siggy that could do those investigations, it would streamline everything markedly.
The Inspector General Act authorizes Siggy's Integrity Committee to investigate allegations of wrongdoing on the part of an IG or senior official within the office. How does the Integrity Committee define wrongdoing?
There are three main buckets that the Integrity Committee uses, and it's significant misconduct, like gross mismanagement. There's conduct unbecoming of an official in that position. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the language, but that's generally the nature of the allegations. It's not. It's got to be significant, if you will.
So that's interesting to me because the IG Act does not define wrongdoing in the relevant statute, and you've just used, as Mr. Greenblatt, I know you're an attorney, I'm an attorney. The definitions you used have what I would call massive holes and subjective interpretation to them. So when you say significant misconduct, what does significant mean? What does misconduct mean? It becomes tautological. And when you say conduct unbecoming, what does that mean? All of those things are incredibly subjective. And that's part of the problem with the IG Act in and of itself, and maybe that's something Congress should look at a little more thoroughly. Without a clear written standard to evaluate complaints, how then is the IC living up to the statutory mandate that its procedures ensure fairness and consistency, keeping in mind that you and I as attorneys, and particularly in investigations, and I look to criminal law on this, everybody wants to know where the bright lines are. And I'm just having trouble seeing where the bright lines are here.
Frequently, sir, there aren't bright lines, but I would say that there are not bright lines in what we do every day as IGs. We have to make hard calls. We have to implement laws that are not expressly defining each and every specific element of every potential violation. We have to implement.
So what you're suggesting then is that Congress has failed to actually, and I don't disagree with this, by the way. Congress has failed to give very specific language that is. We put too many vague notions. We lead things to the agencies and departments, policies to determine how they're going to implement, et cetera. And the reality is a lot of that ends up being subjective.
What due process protections exist for a subject of an IC investigation?
Many. In fact, I think it's got far more than the vast majority of investigations.
Is there any recourse in the courts for an individual who believes their due process rights have been violated by the IC?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would leave that to the courts.
We need the answer to that question, if you can.
Yes, sir.
Each month, the committee receives a notification of every investigation that has gone beyond the 30-day and 150-day period. Most recently, this includes 6 investigations, which has surpassed the 150-day period, 4 of which are from 2022 or earlier. Is it acceptable to have investigations open for 2, 3, or even 4 years?
No, sir. That is a massive problem for us. But I would say that it takes 2 to tango on an investigation. It could be slow investigators, but it also could be subjects that refuse to turn over materials.
I completely understand and agree with that.
Right. I mean, Congress knows both parties in both directions for years, has dealt with these very similar types of issues. So it takes 2 to tango. And so I would say the number, the Integrity Committee over the years has had some large and investigations that take a long time. And a consistent theme through many of them is OIGs that are not cooperating with the investigation. And frankly, if agency heads did the same thing as some of these IGs, and we reported that to Congress, you all, I hope, on a bipartisan basis, would be howling mad.
Well, don't get me started on that. We've requested a lot of your information. We know, I'm sure it's already been discussed. There are several, especially when you talk about Cigar and that, there's lots of IGs that aren't getting information from this administration. This administration's doing everything it can to prevent certain IGs from doing their job. But what I'm asking about, if an IG is engaged in wrongdoing, then SIGI and the IC need to provide it to Congress in an expedited way. We should not have IGs who have engaged in wrongdoing still in office. But if an IG has not engaged in wrongdoing, SIGI and the IC need to close those investigations.
Are you familiar with an IG at Health and Human Services named Christy Grimm?
Yes, sir.
And what happened to her?
She is she is the IG at HHS right now.
But she was also replaced, was she not, as acting IG because she released a report that there were severe shortages at hospitals combating coronavirus?
No, she was acting and then later confirmed under President Biden.
Yes, but she was not confirmed under President Trump.
President Trump hadn't nominated her at that point. She was an acting.
She was replaced as acting. He found a different IG.
I don't believe that was the case. I do think he was asked a question about that report in a press conference and made some comments, perhaps, about her.
What about Steve Linick? Did you know Steve Linick?
Yes, sir.
And who was he?
He was the IG at the State Department.
At the State Department. And what happened to him?
He was removed from office, sir.
He was removed. Why was he removed?
Again, you'll have to refer to the president's.
He was removed because he was investigating Secretary of State Pompeo. And he investigating accusations, not proved, about the misuse of government resources. So when we talk about removing IGs, maybe there's a reason to do it, but there ought to be a really good one, and it can't be because you're doing your job. If we do that in any administration, we compromise the integrity of the IG.
SIGI's Integrity Committee, or IC, investigates wrongdoing by IGs or their staff. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is it Kimberly A. Howell who is currently the chair of the IC?
Correct.
And Kimberly Howell is not an employee of the federal government, is she?
She is an IG of what's called a designated federal entity.
I get that. She is not an employee of the federal government, is she?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Can the president or anyone in the executive branch fire Ms. Howell or any head of the IC?
The president could remove the head of the CBP, where she is the inspector general.
Okay, but the president does not interact with or fire the head of the IC, correct?
Well,
and you've already testified that you don't have any oversight, and you do not oversee Ms. Howell. Isn't that also correct?
I can remove them from the Integrity Committee.
Okay. Well, just over a month ago, the IC delivered a report to the President and Congress with findings of abuse of authority regarding the Social Security Administration's Inspector General. And Ms. Howell sent and signed this report to its recipients. Were you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
An IC report delivered to the President or an agency head then can recommend or result in disciplinary action against an IG or a person working inside an IG office, leading all the way up to termination. Is that correct?
It can recommend that, yes.
Okay, and doesn't that mean that the leadership of CIGI could use the IC to undo the presidential appointment and Senate confirmation of executive officials by individuals that were never nominated and which are actually not even federal employees?
No, I don't agree with that statement at all.
Okay. When the IC asks an IG or an employee of an IG office to respond to an allegation to avoid a full investigation, the respondent must fully refute the allegation such that no reasonable person would conclude that further development would demonstrate that the respondent committed the misconduct. In other words, when they come under investigation, they are the ones that carry the burden of proof with a very high standard for exoneration. Why is this different than American civil and criminal proceedings where the burden of proof is on the accusing party rather than on the accused?
No, that's not a fair representation of what happens in an investigation.
Then explain it to me.
So when a complaint comes in and the Integrity Committee determines that it is opening a case, it generally refers the complaint to the subject or subjects plural and says, here are the allegations.
Refute them.
You have an opportunity to refute them.
And the burden of proof is that they have to prove that the allegation is such that no reasonable person would conclude that further development would demonstrate that the respondent committed the misconduct. Isn't that the standard?
I believe that sounds accurate, but
Okay.
the whole point is that it doesn't, the Integrity Committee wouldn't have to do that step at all. That's a courtesy. That's an extra step.
I would tend to disagree with
Well,
that,
you can
with that
disagree, but that's-
representation.
You can disagree, but that's an extra step that they add to help the subjects. So it's not
Placing the burden of proof on them.
It's being perverted. This is like looking through a funhouse mirror. This is not an accurate portrayal of what's actually happening in the process. This is an opportunity for the subjects, and the Integrity Committee over and over again takes those responses.
So in
and
other
actually
words, what
kills
you're saying-
complaints. Let me finish my answer. Kills complaints and
Excuse
doesn't
me?
get to investigations.
Excuse me?
I'm trying to finish my answer.
I'm going to reclaim my time and ask the questions.
Our witness needs to understand that the gentlewoman controls the time, and I do recognize that you would like the opportunity to respond accordingly. I'm sure that the gentlewoman would give you that opportunity. She controls the time, and I would remind the witness we appreciate him being here, but this is a hearing that the members that are waived on will control their own time, sir. Does the gentleman understand that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Let's move on to a different subject here then. When the IC pursues an investigation against an IG or an employee of the IG office, it does so against them in their personal capacity. Is that correct? Even though the allegations relate to official acts?
It is investigating the individual as opposed to the organization.
So it is against them in their personal capacity, correct?
It is not investigating them in their personal capacity like if it were, say, a driving incident.
Well, let me ask it
related
this
to their
way.
work.
Are they able to access agency documentation that may support their claim of innocence?
I would imagine so.
Do you know one way or the other?
No, but I would imagine they can get materials in their work environment.
In its policies and procedures, the IC states that it may, quote, consider wrongdoing alleged to have occurred while an individual served as a covered person, even if that individual is no longer a covered person or in government service when the IC receives the allegation, end quote. Is the authority to investigate federal employees who are no longer in IG service or retired persons derived from statute, or is that an internal rule?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. If current IGs and IG employees find it difficult to meet the IC standard, how could it be even remotely possible for a former employee to resolve allegations against them, especially if they're not able to access documents from the agency?
As part of the investigation, I would imagine that the Integrity Committee would go to the agency, the OIG in question, to get relevant materials.
But the individual wouldn't have access to that information.
I don't know the answer to that.
How can SIGI be an independent entity entrusted with addressing integrity issues in the offices of Inspector General if they're differential to the OIG that they are tasked with overseeing?
Sir, I find that unfortunate that if there was miscommunication, I take responsibility for that. I don't remember the specific incident, but I take responsibility for it. It's SIGI is under my leadership. We at SIGI, the council, we don't want to step on the toes of the individual IGs and their relationship with Congress. So sometimes we get incoming from Congress about specific members, and we don't. It would be inappropriate for us to weigh in. So sometimes we do defer to the individual IGs. In this case, if that was, we perhaps should have come to you first.
Well, I think so, instead of letting the IG know that we're looking into them. Since we're running late, let me move on to a couple other questions. I think it'll be easier for you to answer. If an IG releases a report and later is determined that there are significant factual errors, what should be done, and should that report be retracted or corrected?
I've seen that in the past, sir, and we try to get it right. The answer, we try to get the right answer, and if we get it wrong, I think it would be wholly appropriate to take down whatever is wrong and replace it with something that is factually accurate.
And is it appropriate for an agency secretary to threaten to withhold information from an IG if they provide a report to Congress without the secretary's approval?
Oh, I don't think that's appropriate.
Would you say that it's illegal?
I don't know the answer to that, and I hesitate to wade into a situation.
Well, thank you. This is something that we're dealing with. Is a secretary telling the IG if they release a report to Congress, they won't have access to any future information. I have a big problem with that.
I can't speak to a single specific situation, but that I would in hypothetical situations I would not support that.
Okay, because that is exactly what we're getting from the DHS IG. Is that they can't release us a report because Secretary Mayorkas is refusing to give them access to future information.
If I was to go back to my district and say, hey, guess what, PACE is great, we should continue it, look what it found.
Oh, it's looking at everything from unemployment insurance to, like I said, the PPP loans. It's looking at federal employees who are getting PPP loans even though they were gainfully employed with the federal government.
How about members of Congress?
I don't know the answer to that.
No, some of them did get it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, actually.
But PACE would look at that, right?
Theoretically, it could.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have. That's a good question.
You probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Possibly. I'm going to demur on that.
No, I mean, fraud is rampant. It's not just, obviously in the public sector, but even in the private sector. And just to do data analytics like this and to use the technology we have now to kind of have a better oversight, I mean, that could save, like I said, already saves billions.
Absolutely. One of the things we found we did at the Department of the Interior, we looked at the federal employees who were also getting, I'm talking about at the department, who were also getting PPP loans, presumably inappropriately. Yeah. And we found that the vast majority of them were identity theft.
Yeah.
They were not actually the employees.
That's what we found in unemployment in Michigan, a lot of identity theft.
The potential for fraud in those programs is enormous.
Yeah.
And what we could do with a data center would be, I think, comparably enormous to prevent that fraud. And with a very small investment of cash, relatively speaking, we're talking about pennies. And if we talk about the expired funds, which I raised at the very beginning, unobligated expired funds, from the IGs going to say we could fund this very quickly. I think this is a game changer, an absolute game changer for the oversight community.
Can you briefly describe the kinds of recoveries and enforcement action supported by IG investigations and give us a general idea of the dollar amounts that you've had to deal with?
In the IG community writ large,
yes.
We have had remarkable success. As I mentioned earlier, we had $693 billion in either question cost or recoveries from OIG and oversight efforts over the past 10 years. It's a remarkable, I think last year alone we had $93 billion. That's just 1 year. If you add up all of the IG budgets, and roll them up and compare that with the $93 billion, it's something like a 26 to 1. So for every dollar appropriated to an OIG, we are turning back $26 in potential savings. So this is serious return on investment, and that doesn't include the variety of investigations and audits and inspections that don't include monetary returns. Like I said, the work on preventing suicides, veteran suicides, the work on protecting nursing home, the elderly in nursing homes, protecting tenants in public housing from sexual predators. Those don't have a dollar figure associated with them. So just looking at the financial return on investment, it's 26 to 1 dollar, but that omits an enormous amount of what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you very much.